friends. Welcome to the Mobile Monger Podcast, where we go behind the scenes in the cheese world to chat with people making, selling, or distributing your favorite specialty food products. I'm your host, Janae Muha, certified cheese professional, longtime cheesemonger, and producer advocate. We've seen the growth of the American artisan cheese industry over the last 20 years, but what happens after those trailblazing cheesemakers are ready to retire? There's been some big sales of companies to larger foreign entities, but in rare cases, the business gets handed over to family. Judy Schad created Capriole in the 80s, and while her children didn't want to take on the family business, her grandson is taking on the helm. Sam Schad grew up in the cheese room and is taking the reins from Judy. Those are big shoes to fill, so how is he managing? With a lot of Judy's knowledge and some gumption of his own.
My name's Sam Schad. I'm the president of Capriole. I'm Judy Schad's grandson. How did I get into cheese? I guess birth.
Born into it.
The first memories I have as a human being are sitting in the creamery break room while my mom worked in there because there was no daycare. So, like 2 weeks after being born, she was bringing me into the creamery every single day. So, it started with being in the creamery a little bit. When I was at like 5 or 6 years old, we were still doing a lot of farmers markets. So I would travel in the local area with my grandma and grandpa. We'd go to either Louisville, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, sometimes Chicago, do the Green City Market. When they would do the feline exhibit, we'd be serving Sophia, and behind us would be a lion. So that was always a really fun experience.
What a dream for a kid, man.
Yeah, I know. Well, I hate to say, I don't want to take any of it for granted, of course, but also I don't really have a lens or, frankly, the context of anything else at this point, because it's all I've ever really known. So I did farmers markets as a kid, spent my summers doing that. In high school, when we were farmstead, I milked the goats for the summers, working, 5 a.m. to noon every single day. Have a lot of respect for farmers after that experience because there's nothing more physically demanding than that. And, my grandma had such a passion for the animals. She had, at one point, I think we had a milking herd of around 450 to 500. And she could remember every single goat's name. She still gets my name confused, though, which is fine. She'll call me Matt Sam because she has a son named Matt. And once she recognizes halfway through, she'll go Matt Sam. So, but never got the goats' names wrong. So, but that just showed how much she cared about the animals and the pedigree and everything that went into that. So then what ended up happening is I graduated from the University of Louisville with my degree in accounting, and I started doing some bookkeeping part-time for them because they just lost their office manager. And that was in 2019. Was there for about 9 months while I was getting my master's degree, and then March of 2020 happens. And obviously that threw everything for a loop. My grandma had to take her figurative and literal step back from the creamery and being in there on a day-to-day basis. And, if you can't trust family, who can you trust, for better or worse, in such a small industry like ours? So I just kind of, over the past couple of years, have just continued to pick up more and more pieces as we've gone along the way because I have a master's in business administration, but really none of that affects anything that I do on the day-to-day basis. And there were no courses in global pandemic at the time. So, you lose 85% of your business overnight. And, I want to show some gratitude. Kathy Strange at Whole Foods. We had a bunch of our Geotrichum ripened cheeses that Whole Foods was nice enough to take off of our hands because the market dropped out. So that was really a saving grace to us. So, it's been a roller coaster, for better or worse, of ups and downs every day. But I'm just really grateful for the experience and to have this opportunity to carry on this legacy that my grandma's built because, everything, like I say, context, I know people really value us as a company, but also I've always just known it as kind of like being a part of my life.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really cool gig, needless to say. So,
Well, speaking of legacy, if you want to kind of take us back to, for people who maybe don't know Capriole's origins and some of your grandmother's story, can you tell us
sure,
a little bit?
absolutely. Yeah, so Judy Schad. It all started with a love. We moved out to a farm in southern Indiana, Greenville. We bought 80 acres, my grandfather Larry and my grandma Judy, and it had turned out after living out there for a couple years that we had found out that the land was owned by my great 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 grandfather in the 1850s. So it just was a complete coincidence that we ended up buying back the property. But one thing had led to another. They're like, well, we need farm animals. It started with cattle and then it started with goats. And my grandma just fell in love with goats because they're so charming. They all have their own personalities. They're their own people, for better or worse. So, one goat turns into two, turns into 10, turns into 50, turns into 100. And one thing led to another. So in 1988, Capriole was formally established. We opened a small creamery on a farm called Huber's in Starlight, Indiana, and she was making cheese there for about 3 years. And then in 1992, we built our own creamery on the family farm, which is still there today, and we're still operating out of there like we did, now 32 years ago that building's been built. So, uh, you know, Judy, and this is just from my lens, maybe this is biased, but she's kind of considered one of the founding mothers of the artisan cheese renaissance in America. You
Not just
know,
your lens. I would say like that's
well, I do
across
have
the
a
board.
bias.
Yeah.
I have my own bias. She went to France in the early 90s with Mary Keene of Cypress Grove, and that's where our inspiration for Wabash Cannonball came from, and that's where Mary got the inspiration for Humboldt Fog. They went to the Loire Valley, which some of these people are probably familiar with, but that's kind of like the founding father of artisan goat cheese. That's where a lot of those geotrichum, really finicky cheeses originated from. So my grandma was really inspired by that and all these ideas, and that came back from people like familiar with Sophia, Piper's Pyramid, Flora, Wabash Cannonball. All of those are really our flagship cheeses that really separate us from a lot of other creameries because they're smart enough not to want to deal with them because they are such finicky, high moisture cheeses that just about anything wants to grow on them, for better or worse. But it's a labor of love. Um, so Judy just kind of continued to build a market, like we were mentioning with farmers markets, because people hear goat cheese nowadays and they're kind of like, oh, that's interesting. I have no idea what it would like to be a woman in the early 90s trying to sell goat cheese in this rural area. The values of the community, it didn't synchronize super well at the time. So, that's where the farmers markets came in and played a really big role of putting our name out there, just going out, for better or worse, at a point, she couldn't even give it away. It was really perfecting her craft through, for better or worse, a labor of love and a lot of mistakes along the way. But when you're passionate about something, you're dedicated to making the best product possible. After, for better or worse, 30 years, she's really made an incredible product. So I'm really grateful for her because she really did the hard part. She built the brand, she built the market for it, and she perfected these recipes that we do nowadays. And it's really big on us to just kind of continue to carry on that legacy and really honor all the hard work she's put into it. Um, I've had people that come up to me and have said, Sam, I tried your cheese and I do what I do in my life because of it. And, I think it's really cool when you have a product that inspires people because, it really means something to people. And as silly as saying cheese can inspire me, there are people out there that really do care and are really passionate about what they do in their life. And I think that kind of goes across the food industry in general. There's these deep connections between just being really passionate and dedicated to your craft. Um, so yeah, I've just for the past couple of years really tried to be a sponge of Judy's experience, learning from the rights and the wrongs, for better or worse. And needless to say, we have our tiffs both as a grandmother and a grandson, but also as a legacy cheesemaker and a future and current cheesemaker at this point. So uh, but I say this almost out of respect. I almost don't consider myself a cheesemaker just because out of respect for all of the people that have been doing it for so long, our production crew, the people that are in there every single day, pasteurizing the milk, doing the entire process. I have a lot of respect for our workers and the hard work they put in because, outside of pasteurizing and vacuum sealing, every single step of the process is done by hand. We still hand ladle our curd. All of our molds are filled by hand. Every single tray, every single dish, every single step of the process. It's an incredibly demanding, incredibly physical job because I think people really romanticize the idea of cheese making and what it is. They think it's rainbows and flowers, but really it's
A
more
lot of
notes for the
dishwashing.
grindstone. Yeah, you're very right. You're very right. It is mostly cleaning, and food safety is a whole nother thing we can talk about later. But that's been another opportunity for me because not only having to learn about cheese making, I have to learn about every single aspect of the company in great detail. So it's more of a what's in front of me and what needs to be addressed for me to better figure out, what needs to be done. So it's a huge learning experience every single day. So yeah.
Well, that kind of leads into kind of the main topic of what I was hoping we could talk about is succession planning, because in the industry, we are seeing a lot of people who are kind of aging to a certain level where they're not able to do the same things within their companies anymore. So it's pretty complex because a lot of people, like a few years ago, there was a panel at ACS that was talking about succession planning, and Alex Birchenough, somebody asked her, like, what was her plan for, when she's ready to retire or whatever, and like what happens to her cheese. And she was like, it dies with me. And like that was her response.
Mhm.
And that is a very real thing for a lot of people. Um, so I just wanted to talk about like what that looks like for Capriole. And did you always want to step into this role, or was this kind of something that was necessitated by where you're at?
You know, it's hard to say because here's the thing, like it makes so much sense at the end of the day, but I wouldn't say like I dreamed of being a cheesemaker one day. Like that would be a fallacy if I were to say that. But at the same time, not to get too much into it, but I was an only child that was raised by a single parent, and my grandparents were a really big part of my early childhood and even early adulthood and just growing up in general. So I've always been deeply connected to the business, and it's always given me so many unique opportunities that a lot of people haven't had in their life, especially at my age. Um, I think really COVID sort of forced its hand, but like the way I look at it now, like I wouldn't want to be doing anything else at this point. My grandma, for better or worse, has done it for the last 40 years. If I'm lucky enough, I'll get to do it for the next 40 years, which is a really exciting opportunity because, I think Judy shared a very similar succession plan at this point, which would have been death, and that would have been it, because you're so almost caught in the moment. It's like, and who are you going to find? That's one thing I've learned is cheesemakers do not grow on trees, let alone artisan, doing it at the highest level. There are very few people out there that can replace a role like that. And these cheeses are our children for better or worse. Each batch is an opportunity to learn something new, and you get to see the life cycle of it for better or worse. So it's a really gratifying experience. So for better or worse, because there are still tons of mistakes even today, and even for my crew, needless to say, we don't have, Judy knows more in her like left toe than all of us combined when it comes to cheese making, and she'll say like it's just common sense, and I'm like, Grandma, your common sense and the general public's common sense, it's not right or wrong, but just through that lens, you have to recognize that it's not as obvious to some as it is to others. So I just want to continue to learn what I can. And frankly, I'm going to have to make a lot of mistakes along the way. And I'm just so grateful that people, for better or worse, we get a second chance. Because I know there's a lot of creameries out there, especially on the smaller side of things. Like if they have a bad batch, they might not get a second chance with a restaurant, with a distribution company, whatever it is. And I'm just so grateful that she's built that reputation that people give us that second chance because it wouldn't be doable otherwise. So I'm really excited. We say we want to grow, but growing for us is it's such a small scale now that it's like, what does that mean going from 7 employees to 12 employees? I mean, that would be huge for us. But we always look for what's the next step? How much bigger can we get? But do we really want to get big? We've always kind of held our hat on, the name, I think, has the name of the brand, the aura that it has for better or worse is so much bigger than the actual production size of it. And we've been around for so long, so many people have heard of us that they don't realize that it's still a 2,500 square foot facility. Well, like I said, with 7 full-time employees, and people are like, oh, I thought you would have been a lot bigger than that. It's like, no, my Durham Judy has just been doing it for a really long time. So
I
I'm
think
just
that's a
excited
really
to see
good
where.
thing to bring up, though, because I think a lot of people think that, Some of the more well-known companies in the country are bigger than they really are. So like, I've seen the facility. It's tiny. It's not a huge facility, but you guys pump out a ton of cheese and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Same with like a lot of other companies that I've been to. Like people see Uplands and think it's a lot bigger than it really is because they're nationally distributed and
Mhm.
widely known as like, one of the best cheeses in the country. And it's
Mhm.
also just a really tiny, like, during Rush Creek season, obviously the need for employees is larger, but like it's still ultimately just a small handful of people that are pumping out all of this cheese. And I think that's always a good reminder to people that just because somebody's got a big name doesn't mean that they have a lot of people working there or it's a
Yeah, the
big company.
production or the actual output might not be as big as what like I said, the reputation or the name of it actually is. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I know that Judy has definitely taken a huge step back. Like what kind of expertise are you still leaning on her for? And like how often is she involved with what's happening at the creamery?
So, you're familiar with it, but Judy's house is 100 feet from the creamery.
It's
So
like literally right there.
yeah, like you could throw a stone and hit the front window. You might accidentally break it if you threw it hard enough. But, so when it comes to, she doesn't deal with any of the fun office management stuff, but like when it comes to the cheese making, the passion is still there and it's at the highest level. Her palate is what it is. Um, Really, whenever we have problems or we kind of do experimenting with stuff, call it R&D for better or worse, she's really the ear for that because we are going through a transition, but we really want to honor the legacy she's built and for better or worse, really feed off of her what she thinks does or does not make sense, especially with like just issues with cheese, like we were talking about. Not to get too much into the exciting stuff, but we do our geotrichum cheeses and we've been getting a ton of Penicillium candidum on them, which, you know, is by no means a food safety risk, but it's still a problem because customers wonder what's going on here. And, I just have, I want to learn from her experience of what do we do in situations like this? And we kind of, we can only really tackle them as we come because so much of Judy's stuff when she was doing it, there wasn't really a ton of science for it. The science of cheese making and even on the regulatory side, how much lack of information there is out there
Or
is
just
pretty
access to
staggering.
it even. So like there
Exactly.
could have been there, but like getting access to it was probably really difficult too.
Yeah, well, like, like I was remembering when I was learning, taking some of my own cheese making 101 courses, talking about like mother cultures and starter cultures. Like, I could not imagine doing that now. Like, that sounds insane. The idea of this basically sour cup of milk is where everything starts. And that's how she did it for years that way. And I mean, I really respect that because she had to do it the hard way, it's insane. Um, but I would say just a more, she's probably at the creamery 2 days a week. Depends on the time of year too, because she's really big into her garden right now, and that takes up a ton of her energy. She's turning, well, she'll hate me if I say this, 82. So, she is a little limited on her energy, but the passion and the love for the cheese will never die. So, we keep her pretty in when it comes to the cheese making, tackling random things there, she's always involved and she always loves to help whenever she can. And then, of course, we get into a huge argument, which is always, that's just the love of and the best part of the family business. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, how fortunate for you to have access to all of that information still embedded in her head because they're volumes. That's volumes.
Yeah, exactly. I need her to write a book just with all the little random notes and whatever pops in there, and then I can organize it. So, because right now it's all there, and one day I, not, I won't have that opportunity. So I want to take every day and just be grateful because she's always been around me when I'm growing up and she'll always be my grandmother first. But she also, she's for better or worse a legacy or a titan in this industry for better or worse. So going to things like ACS, I went to my first ACS last year. That was just a really great experience to be able to see her kind of as a celebrity. I don't want to say to sound ridiculous.
I was gonna say you were getting paraded around by a queen at
Yeah,
ACS.
exactly. And just the connection. I mean, she knows everybody, because after you've done it for this long, you run into everybody at one point or another. So, getting to meet those connections and meet the people that, I got the opportunity to meet Allison Hooper this year. And that was a really great chance because I know she did pretty well when it came to the whole cheese making thing, needless to say. And just continue to make those connections because those are going to be the most valuable things are the people you know sometimes, not what you know, but who you know. We've made really good connections with Larry Hedrick at Leclerc Creamery. He's been a really great person to get to know. And just, I want to continue to make those relationships, because that's the most important thing in just this tiny little world. We all need help every now and then. We all need to make those connections and be able to lean on one another. Because if not, it won't work. Not to be, daunting or anything, but that's what I realized. Like, we all really have to depend on one another as this small little crazy world that we live in. So,
That's what I love about the cheese industry.
right.
So, obviously Judy has run the company for so long. What are you bringing to this company that might be a little bit as a different way of thinking or new approaches? What are you bringing to the table these days, Sam?
Well, my big goal is to make the company as sustainable as possible. All of my background is business. I have like I said, undergrad in accounting and a master's in business administration. So I'm a numbers person. And, my goal is to make the company profitable, sustainable, and I want to be able to take care of our employees as best as we can. I feel a responsibility to the 7 people, the 7 families that work there now, because they depend on us to be able to provide with them as best as we possibly can. So, being able to think forward of, what can I do with my experience, whether it be limited at this time to try to help them. And I'm just so grateful for the people there because I couldn't do it without them. I'm just, for better or worse, a person that connects the dots, but I don't really do any of the hard work. I feel like it's really all them and the best that I can take care of them and make it a sustainable business so that we can go for the next 40 years. That's really important to me. And in the days of COVID and everything, the cost of everything going up, the cost of feed for milk, goat milk is incredibly expensive because, it takes, for better or worse, 8 or 9 animals for the equivalent of a cow. And I mean, there's just so much more overhead that goes into things like that. So I just want to try to build it, but make it sustainable so that we continue to make incredible products, but also be able to take care of the people that work there on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. Um, what are you working on for Capriole? Like, are you working on any new cheeses, or are you just trying to get the ones that y'all make under your belt before you start introducing new things?
So we are doing a little bit of R&D. We have a cheesemaker in there now. Shout out to Maggie Pirtle. She's been with us for 4 years now, and she is just a rock star. I don't say the word love lightly, but I really do love Maggie and appreciate everything that she's done for us. So, she's just learning from her experiences there as well, and kind of leaning on Judy and getting her foresight on things. And but we're still learning as cheesemakers. Like, we're still, it feels like, and this is all in hindsight, Judy, like I feel like we are very novice level where we have like so much opportunity to learn, better develop things. Judy is pretty anti new cheese. These are all her children, and the idea that
Yeah.
we would want to do anything other than that is crazy. The last cheese we produced was T Rose. I don't know if you've ever had T Rose
Yeah, it's
before, but
beautiful.
that was a product of the pandemic. We were getting chestnut leaves in 2020, and needless to say, did not know how many. For greater context, we have a cheese named O'Bannon, which is a play on a French Banon. It's chestnut leaves that are soaked in bourbon, and we get those leaves every single June and July, starting next week, which is exciting. But in June of 2020, we had very little understanding of what was going on, needless to say. And, by January of 2021, we ran out of chestnut leaves. And so, for better or worse, I went to Judy and I kind of asked her, I was like, we need to find something that's a 6 ounce fresh goat cheese that can be vacuum sealed and kind of fit a similar market, for better or worse. And in like, 10 minutes, she came up with T Rose. So T Rose is a rose petal, herbs Provence, fennel pollen, fresh goat cheese that's just rolled. It's very colorful, looks great in a case. And it's an homage to the first goat that she got from Mary Keene, T Rose, the name of the goat that you see on our label today. So our R&D, us as cheesemaker, our novice level, it's very hard to think about how can we do things at the highest level possible. But I think R&D is a really important thing for our staff because that's how you get inspired. That's how you get more interested because, for better or worse, if someone says, I made this cheese, you can really hang your hat on something and take a greater pride and respect for what you do. Because even the people that work for us today, like they still even have very little context for, you know, who we are as a company. And you can hear it from your boss for better or worse, but when you don't get out there to see the world and there's nothing else comparable, it's hard to get a greater level of appreciation. And that's why I'm so excited that we're going to be able to get Maggie out there and another member of our crew to see ACS so that they can make those connections and get to know people because I'm hoping that they'll take a greater pride in their work. But we are doing some R&D. We are looking at doing some holiday stuff, and Judy doesn't really like the ideas, but I try to reiterate how important I think it is. If outside of it, well, it does need to taste good. That's the most important thing, as long as it tastes good.
Always the most important part.
Thing. But she's like, well, why do they think of these flavors? Like this is why this flavor profile? I'm like, well, Grandma, people don't have the same context for goat cheese like you do. So we are working on a couple of things, thinking about maybe bringing some cheeses back that we've had from the past, which is exciting, and just get them in the habit of doing some different things so that they don't get too caught in going through the motions at this point. So
Yeah.
we do have some ripened cheese we're looking at, playing around with some of our fresh cheeses as well, because the big thing we're seeing right now, and this is through our distributors and our sales for better or worse, but the market is changing. The workforce is a lot different than it used to be. And having a trained staff to handle a lot of our cheeses, specifically those Geotrichum cheeses, you need to have a monger that knows what they're doing. And they're really hard to find out there. You leave one of those cheeses out and put it in the wrong condition, it'll be ruined by the next day. It's not something that you can just sit in a refrigerator and it'll be fine for 6 months.
Yeah.
It isn't a farm that you can just put out in, room temperature and it's fine. You know, uh,
Takes a little more skill to sell for sure.
yeah. So, what we're learning is knowing that this market seems to be changing, the staff that's available for that we have to be mindful of, where is the demand for these things? And, we want to try to be as proactive as possible, but, we are definitely seeing shifts, post, COVID, of course, more than anything, how things have changed since then. So, I want to use, for better or worse, Judy's palette with my understanding of how things shift. And, I think we really can make a dynamic duo. Now we still butt heads all the time about certain things, but I'm really excited for the chance to really do our first R&D because like since I've been there, we did T rows, but that wasn't really the formal process of getting into the weeds for things because she's kind of a natural at it, and I'm grateful for that. But it's hard to have your own experience, and people need to have their own experiences for better or worse. So
Yeah.
our ripened cheeses are, I assume you've had Juliana, one of our Penicillium candidum cheeses that we do. Um, those are always going to be our flagships, but I think it's really important to let our cheesemakers have their own influence. And I think that'll be over the coming months. There'll be some really great opportunities there for them to have put their own footprint there without losing, what our identity, what our brand values are.
Absolutely. How difficult is it for you to find people to work out there? Because I would imagine it not to be the easiest thing in the world.
Well, not to get too much into it, but one thing I have learned is when you are making artisan French style goat cheeses in the hillsides of southern Indiana, it is hard to find people that give a crap about it. I would love for Maggie to get an experienced cheesemaker that came in and worked with her and got their hands dirty that had some context from another creamery, but I don't want to poach somebody from someone else, but I'd love to give someone the opportunity to have their influence as well, because, for better or worse, the most we can ask for in terms of experience is working in a kitchen. You know, the most trained person we'll find locally is if they worked at a Murray's Cheese Shop in Kroger. It's incredibly difficult and it's hard to find people that care because you have to care about this job. This isn't just a job where you show up and go through the motions. If not, the product will always suffer. And at the end of the day, the customer will suffer. And, our cheeses are at a certain price point where people really have a high expectation, and they should. And they might not complain about it, but they just might not ever buy it again. So that's why, for better or worse, just like in a food industry, you're only as good as the last thing that you put out. So that's something for us always to, really hang our hat on, and something even I struggle with of like, I want to be as profitable and successful as possible, but at the same time, like we don't want to send out bad cheese. And that's always something that I've struggled with every single day of like, I just see it, I see a red line or, I see money signs just burning in the air. And it's like, what do I do here? Because I really want to do as much as I possibly can to, like I said, support not just our workers, but also our farmers, the people that provide us with our milk. Because going back, the cost of feed has gone up, the cost of just transportation, all of it is incredibly difficult. So,
I can
but
imagine that being difficult for an accounting person because
yeah,
cheese
but
making is
also,
not like you're gonna be in the black all the time.
yeah, well, I picked pretty much like the worst industry to go into if my goal is profitability.
Yeah,
I've realized,
exactly.
this is when I got from Larry Hedrick was like, how do you become a millionaire making cheeses? You have to start with $2 million, and that's really the only way. So,
Yeah.
because
You
then
got to
you're
lose a
gonna lose
million
a
to be a
million
millionaire.
immediately.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
exactly. So that's really something hard for me to struggle with, and that's something I'm just gonna have to get better. But really understanding, even for me to learn, it'd be better to throw something away than to, you know pass something along that frankly a customer would not accept or a distributor wouldn't accept. So it's an ongoing battle for me because, one of the things that I will credit and criticize Judy for at the same time is, for the first 20, 25 years, she didn't pay herself. She was there every single day, working 60, 70 hours a week, not making a dime because she just loved cheese and she loved the industry. And I cannot take that same claim because I have to make money.
Yeah.
So just like most of, the world, but which it just shows how passionate and how dedicated she was to something to do that. But also when we talk about sustainability, like that's such a huge part of it, because we want to be able to provide to all of our employees as much as possible whenever the opportunity is there, of course. So,
Yeah.
we don't offer health insurance, which is always a big thing for me that I always get worried about, but I try to find other opportunities and just, try to show gratitude wherever there's an opportunity to do so. So,
Well, we've covered quite a few topics. Is there anything about Capriole that you really want people to know?
yeah, I just want to express gratitude to anyone that's ever supported my family and our crew and just the crazy wild thing that we're doing out there. Every customer, every restaurant that cares or stuff like that's a big deal to us because you're giving us a chance and you're letting the end customer try something that they've never experienced before, most likely, because there aren't a lot of our styles of cheeses out there. I know, Veronica, Blakesville Creamery, they're making some amazing stuff right now. I loved getting to meet her at ACS last year. Um, you know, I just thank everyone out there, thank all the cheesemakers, thank all the different creameries. We've gotten so much support over these last couple of years that like I don't know where we would be without those people, and they wouldn't do it if it wasn't Judy, and maybe if it wasn't, but I don't know. But just I get so many verbally affirming things from people, and it's not just words, but it's also actions as well. So anybody that's listening to this, thank you so much. It's a huge deal for us, and you're supporting farmers, you're supporting families, and we just thank you so much. I don't know else other than just be grateful for the experience now. Um, can I give shout outs?
Sure.
Or let's
Absolutely.
give a shout out to my fiance Rachel. She is so patient with me. Some of these days are really hard. It's hard to separate yourself from the business because you're always wondering about the next thing or worried about just the place burning down.
I
Um,
mean, especially as a family business too, where like your life has been tied to this business for your entire life, pretty much. I'm sure that separation is even harder.
Yeah, absolutely. For the first 3 years I worked there, I didn't go on vacation. We've just now gotten to set up where like I take a week off in January, which is really cool. But even then, it's hard to separate yourself because then you want to make sure that everything's okay. You don't want anything to go wrong. And you might leave at, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, but like all I do is think about this place because I want to do, I'm so grateful for having this chance, just being for better or worse handed a company that's had all the hard work done at this point. So I just want to, continue to carry that on. So shout out to Rachel. I love you, Rachel. You see a lot of the less exciting sides of it, for better or worse, a lot of the stress, a lot of the hair pulling. She pulled out my first gray hair. So that's really cool.
Well, as someone who is fully gray, it's not that bad
Yeah,
on
it
this
looks
side.
great though. You would do it a lot better than I would at this point. Um, Shout out to Judy Schad, of course. Thank you, Grandma. I love you so much. Um, Shout out to our Amish milk producers that definitely won't see this podcast, but thank you for everything that you do because technology. Shout out to Maggie again. Maggie, thank you so much for all your hard work to everyone that works there. I'm incredibly grateful to you all for all the hard work you put in. Starts at 6 a.m. and the day's done when the day's done. So thank you so much for that. And to all our distributors and customers that support you once again, thank you so much.
Well, I've got three little questions that I always ask at the end.
Okay.
Um, so what is your current cheese crush? What cheese are
Well,
you
just because
just
you mentioned,
eating a ton right now?
well, not right now, but if I were to say like the one that I think about more than anything would definitely be Uplands, the Rush Creek Reserve. I love washed rind cheeses. My little story with that is when I was a kid, I was like I said, I was in the creamery at a very young age, and we have a cheese called Mount St. Francis, which is a Beelan and washed rind goat cheese. And at that time it was raw milk. So what my mom would do is she would put a piece of Mount St. Francis in the windowsill and let it sit for, 1 or 2 hours to where it was basically goo. And that's like the first memory I have as a person is eating Mount St. Francis. And anyone that's ever had a wash rind cheese, it's a pretty funky, it got a unique flavor profile, and it can definitely rub people the wrong way. But I feel like that really built my palate starting off. And Rush Creek Reserve, I mean, I was just those wash rinds really mean something special to me. My Mount St. Francis is my favorite cheese that we make. And I got the first chance to meet Andy at ACS last year, and he's definitely someone that drinks the Kool-Aid, just like Judy does. And I love getting to meet people like that are almost so, I want to say blind to their passion, but like they're so genuinely into it. So getting to meet him was a really great opportunity. So shout out to Upland Creamery.
Awesome. What is your favorite pairing, just across the board?
Oh, definitely. Well, I know this is a boring one, but
There's no boring
definitely like it.
pairings.
Well, definitely like a washed rind with I love it with like a fig jam, something a little sweet to kind of cut through it. Personally, fig jam is like my favorite topping. And maybe with like a stout or something really heavy, because that's what we wash our Mount St. Francis in, is a nice stout beer. So yeah, very, very pro wash rind. I know it's not the most creative, but it's honest. I don't know what to tell you. I love a
I
little bit of funk.
I
The more
prefer
funk, the better.
honesty than more than anything, really. So I'm into it.
Right.
What is like your favorite or your best cheese memory? It doesn't necessarily have to be like a cheese you were eating in particular, but like it could be a time and a place. Um, so
Oh,
something that your
it would
cheese
definitely,
sanctuary.
yeah. It would definitely be. I think we were doing it. Was it a show in New York, or maybe it was ACS? But there was a woman that had came up to my grandma and just immediately started crying. She just like shook her hand. She was just like, "Thank you so, so much for what you do. It means so much to me." And of one of the quotes of Judy is like, "Oh, honey." And she just, I love to see the influence that my grandma has had. And I think, things like ACS are a great chance for that, to really see people that also care, because you don't get a lot of it here outside of our own crew. So definitely, yeah, there was just a moment where I was just like, wow, grandma's pretty cool, because she's always just been grandma. Um, so yeah, anything as an homage to Judy at this point.
That's pretty cool to be able to see the impact that she has had on the industry because I'm sure that it is pretty insulated out there, so you don't necessarily see it. But going to something like ACS with her, you definitely will see the amount of people who hold Judy in high
Right.
regard.
When I want my crew to see that as well, because they'll be like, oh, so this lady that just complains about everything we make, other people actually think that she's pretty cool, huh? So yeah, so I think we've got some really exciting things planned, and I'm really looking forward to the future and just continuing to work with Judy and just continuing to meet a lot of other amazing people in the industry. So
Well, where can people find you? Where can people find Capriole and all of the things?
we are nationally distributed, most major markets you can find us, but exciting to announce that we do have our online store set back up. It's a logistical nightmare, and shipping perishable goat cheese is an experience all of its own. But
Especially this time of year.
exactly, of course, I decided to open it when we get 90-degree heat waves. So everyone, I'm so sorry about that. But we've had people in like North Dakota that have been like, "Where do I get your cheese?" And I'm like, I don't know. So, we don't want it to be in any way a competitor to our, the restaurants, the retailers, the distributors that support us now. We just want to see it as an opportunity for someone that can't get their hands on it. We want to make sure anyone that wants to give us love or support, we want to have the opportunity to give them, great tasting goat cheese.
You guys are also on Instagram and all the social medias and
Yeah,
whatnot.
we got a TikTok now, so
Whoa,
that's
look
pretty
at
exciting.
you.
Yeah, yeah. Follow us on TikTok, yeah, Facebook, all the different media platforms. So give us a follow, a like.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sam, for chatting with me. It's really your experience right now is very unique. And so I hope that people are going to be able to take what you're learning and learn and grow from that also, because you're setting the stage for it. So
Yeah, it's a little nerve-wracking, but I'm just grateful to be here, and every day is an opportunity to learn something new and get better.
thanks, Sam, for coming on the podcast. These conversations are so important as we look forward to the future of artisan cheesemaking by legacy brands. This podcast is recorded, produced, and edited by me, Janae Muha. Musical credits to my husband, Ben Muha. If you want to continue the conversation, find me on Instagram or Facebook. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite listening platform so more people can find this podcast. Thanks for listening, and remember to keep spreading the word of good curd.